What does authenticity mean?
I understand things in the simplest form, the way I think, the things I say, and the way I act. To me, that was it. But what was it about the topic that called out to you?
As a first-time founder, I think navigating my own leadership style and then also seeing so many leaders coming up within our organization.
How are you kind of facilitating that?
A one-of-one company, we're a one-of-one team, I'm a one-of-one leader.
Right.
We're all different flowers that are going to bloom and blossom as we need to.
I love that.
Folks who are looking for jobs, job seekers are also trying to figure out what's this place really like.
Yeah, and I mean, all of us are spending so much of our time working today, right? Like there's so much overlap with your work and life. Like you better enjoy the workplace that you're in, right? Like people you're with.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Close the Loop. Really excited for today's topic, which is about authenticity. I think for a lot of people, unfortunately, being authentic at work seems difficult. It seems like it's not something they're allowed to do. And even for leaders, I think a lot of leaders have struggled to find their authentic self and really be who they are. But I think all of us, if not all the time, have definitely had moments where being authentic has felt extremely liberating in the workplace. And I'm really excited to be able to chat today with Preeti, who heads people at HackerRank, to really understand how organizations can be more authentic, how we as leaders can be more authentic, and how teams can increase authenticity that they feel and they work with every single day. So really excited to chat with you today, Preeti. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. It's a topic very close to my heart, so I'm glad we're talking about this.
You chose this topic intentionally, right? It obviously matters and means something to you. So what does authenticity mean to you?
Yeah, I'm glad we're starting with this question because authenticity as a word, I feel like it's a word that gets thrown around a lot. But I also feel like it's a word that's misused or it's even misunderstood to a certain degree, right? A lot of times when people say, I'm being very authentic, you confuse it with oversharing or you confuse it with, let's say, being overly emotional. Or sometimes it's even that, this is who I am licensed for being unkind or saying something that's inappropriate, right? So I do feel like it gets confused with a lot of these things. But for me, that's just poor behavior in disguise, right? Like that to me is not authenticity. I understand things in the simplest form. So for me, in the simplest form, authenticity would mean if the way I think, the things I say, and the way I act, if there is alignment in all these three, then I am operating authentically, right? If I'm able to do all these three things in sync consistently, then I'm not being performative, then I'm being a lot more real. So for me, when I think of authenticity, I think of that. Now, of course, if your natural way of being is to bulldoze people through, then being real or being who you are isn't the goal. Like I feel like self-awareness or reflection or introspection, it is at the baseline of authentic leadership for me, right? And when we started talking about this topic personally, I was thinking about, when I think of authenticity, I think of it at probably three different levels, right? Like I think of it at a self level. Am I leading in a way which is most authentic to me as a leader, as who I am? Second is, am I creating psychological safety for the team members so they can show up in the way that they are? And if you zoom out even further, you touched on it briefly, but at a company level, are we creating a culture that is truly authentic to who we are as a company? We're not trying to model it on what company X does or what company Y does, but like, do these decisions feel right to us? And I feel like humans are very socially adept. Yeah, like they are. If you're not being genuine, like people are able to feel it, right? Like even if you don't articulate it, you feel it. So to me, that was it. But what was it about the topic that called out to you?
It's how we try to be ourselves every single day. I think a part of liking what you do is the purpose and the mission of it. But I think it's also, as you move towards a mission, it's like, what does the journey feel like? And I think the more that you can feel like yourself, the better. And I think for me, as a first-time founder, I think navigating my own leadership style and then also seeing so many leaders coming up within our organization and people joining as freshers in our team.
Right.
Like what are we telling people is allowed here, right?
Yeah.
Who are they allowed to be? What's in this kind of Overton window of what's allowed to be said and expressed and what's outside of it?
Right.
So I think that's what it is for me. I think I just want to make sure my team they feel like they can be themselves. Yeah.
And you and I were chatting about this a little bit earlier, but there are times that you're not allowed to be a certain way, right? Or there are cultures, unfortunately, even today, where you're not probably allowed to be your most authentic self. So I'm curious to know from you, how are you modeling that, or how are you kind of facilitating that?
I think honestly, being mindful, I think if spending time, for me at least, having a meditation practice and being present is really important, because I think it slows things down, and rather than sort of reacting in unintentional ways where I may be modeling what I think leadership looked like over there, or
Right.
maybe saying, oh, our organization should work like this other organization. I think, at least for me personally, when I'm mindful, when I've taken a moment, I can remember that, like, we are a one of one company, we're a one of one team, I'm a one of one leader.
Right.
We're all different flowers that are going to bloom and blossom as we need to, and
I love that. Yeah.
we like that then allows me to show up probably more authentically. So I think for me it's about slowing down.
Yeah. And that probably gives a license to others to do the same.
Totally.
As well.
Totally. Why do you think so many leaders struggle with this showing up authentically?
Yeah.
And it's definitely it's part of a leader's growth journey, right?
Yeah.
Maybe if you can share your own story of how you've been able to show up as you.
Yeah, sure. There's so much content out there on what a good leader looks like, right? Maybe traditionally, or maybe even a few years ago, I started my career with really large companies, and then I did a stint in absolute startups, and now I'm in a company which is over a decade old. We're a tech-first global company, so very different industries, very different evolution stages as well. And earlier in my career, when I would think of the word leader, I would often think of maybe someone who is like very charismatic, someone who's very commanding, someone who is very confident, right? And these are all great traits for a leader to have, but it's a very narrow view of what a great leader can look like, right? Fortunately, I've also worked with leaders who were equally impactful, but worked in a very different way. They led in a quiet way. I worked with leaders who led from the back of the room, worked with leaders who operated just with pure support and trust, right? And those were equally impactful as well. So at some point, it's about finding your own leadership style and what resonates with you. Some of it you look at and you said, okay, that resonates with me, you want to do that. Some of it you say, note to self, never do that, So that happens as well. If I have to get a little bit more personal and talk about my journey, then, earlier in my career, I would often be one of the only women on the leadership table. It's changing today, which I'm very glad that it is. A lot of times I would also be the only Indian person in the room, and a lot of times I would also be the youngest person on the table. Doesn't happen, unfortunately, now, but that used to happen. And when you're at that intersectionality of these minority groups, right, what naturally ends up happening for you is you want to model behaviors that you see, and you just really want to fit in, right? And for me, I think, the biggest unlock happened, I don't remember where I read it, but the biggest unlock for me happened when I read this statement which said, would you want to be led by you? Right? So if you take a beat and actually think about it, there's a difference in the way that we want to be led versus the way we lead sometimes, right? And it shouldn't be. It should be the same thing. But if I ask you, Ryan, like, what kind of manager would you want, right? You would say things like, I want a manager who trusts me. I want a manager who's transparent. I want a manager who's able to give me difficult feedback in a way that's respectful. I want a manager who tells me what potential I have, know?
It's very clear.
It's very clear. We know that. But if we truly introspect, like sit with ourselves and be honest and say, are those things that I'm doing for my team? I did that. And for some of those questions, the answer was no, right? Then you've got to be really honest with yourself and say, okay, I need to make these changes, and here are things that I'm going to do. So that probably was a big unlock for me. The only other thing I would add in that is I think over time, you also learn from what are things that are energizing you as a leader and what are things that are draining you as a leader, right? So what I find is that when I'm performative in a conversation meeting, or when I'm going into things like that, where I'm maybe playing a part, those are things that drain me. I dread doing them. I don't enjoy it. But when I'm talking in a calm and transparent way, then even the most difficult conversation is not draining, right? So those probably.
And early in your career, obviously you've kind of climbed the ladder of different roles. You have significant responsibility leading people now at HackerRank. But early in your career, like when you're just getting started and you don't, maybe you don't have the tools or the confidence, you don't have the role models yet. Like, What's your advice for folks navigating those first few years?
I can probably tell you personally, I think I suffered from, I'll say this openly, but I suffered from imposter syndrome for like a very long time in my career, right? I was very fortunate to work with leaders who believed in me.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, you can borrow that trust and belief from people who believe in you, even if you don't have that in yourself yet, till you get to a stage that you can build that.
Yeah.
And when I look back, I think, I was telling you this earlier, my first manager at Fidelity, Mohit, giving you a quick shout out, but my first manager at Fidelity was my first job. Probably the single greatest thing that happened to my career, because I was a 22, 23-year-old fresh out of college, and here I had somebody who came and consistently told me how much potential they saw in me, right?
Yeah.
And I borrowed that kind of confidence from them, and I believed in them. Nobody gives you a job or an opportunity if you're not good at it, right? Like if you're in the room or if you're on the table, you are there because you deserve to be there. And today, I think I've like modeled a lot of that with my team, and I feel like my single most important or critical responsibility as a leader is to show people the potential that they don't see in themselves, right? Because someone did that for me at some point. So if I don't know if that's advice, but my advice would be to believe in the fact that you are there for a reason.
Yeah, I think those first manager experiences really set the tone for like, oh, what does leadership even look like, right? And it kind of imprints this concept of what's allowed and what's not allowed, and what works and what doesn't work. And so and similarly, I think, my first manager, I think one of the, among the kind of great traits that Noah had, I think one was just really being comfortable enough to really even move, I think physically in a way. I think that really struck me.
Say more? Like what?
I think he didn't really hesitate to sort of be very open, fluid with his body language, and I think having that physical openness really opens things up for people around him.
Yeah.
Whereas I think a lot of folks operate also in sort of this physical tightness all the time. So that's actually something that stood out for me. Now that you're kind of in a leadership role at a company, and HackerRank's been around for 10 years. You told me earlier about this exercise you did to redefine who the company is and kind of reconnect to that authenticity.
Right.
I do see a lot of organizations, even our own, I think, go beyond even taking inspiration from, say, an Amazon or a really large company. But I think a lot of times an org will default to saying we need to be just like them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How have you navigated this at an org level, right? How can orgs be more authentic and not just kind of try to copy, be those guys? Right?
Shiny object syndrome is real, and there's always a new culture hack on LinkedIn that's doing the rounds, right? Like someone's doing walking meetings, someone's doing no meeting Fridays, and you start thinking, okay, should I do that as well? Like, does it make sense for us? But the exercise that I was telling you about earlier, we kind of had a moment about 2 years ago where the founders and I, Vivek Hari and I, took a pause and said, hey, our mission statement and our values, very valuable, but are they still reflective of who we are as an organization or not? We formed them maybe a decade ago. We are not the same people that we were a decade ago. We're not the same company that we were a decade ago, and the world is not the same that it was a decade ago as well, right? Everything has changed. So then we said, okay, why don't we take a pause and say, do we need to redefine what our mission in this world is, and do we need to redefine the values that we stand for as a company or not? And we started on that journey of like truly embracing who we are authentically as a company, right? And the way that we went about doing this, I love the entire process and the way that it unfolded. The easiest way to do it is to engage with some consultants and to bring them on and give them the reins to run that for you. Yeah. We didn't want to be in a boardroom with just the leadership team and the consultants. We wanted to do it from the ground up, and we really wanted to hear from people on what does it mean to be in HackerRank and what are things that you love about being here or not, right? So we looked at the mission and we looked at the values. So what we did was we went about asking our employees deep questions, right? So roll out a survey, ask them questions on mission statement like, what makes you proud about being a HackerRanker, right?
Yeah.
What are things that make you jump out of bed every morning? What is the difference that you think HackerRank is making in the world? One of the best questions that I think we asked was, it's 10 years later, there's a headline in the newspaper about HackerRank. What's that headline? What do you want it to read, right? And we got some really thoughtful insights that came in from people. We actually probably one of the surveys that saw most participation that came in.
Could you actually share one? Like, was there one of those responses that really stood out to you?
Yeah, I can. And I'll link it to what we finally arrived. So our mission statement today is change the world to value skills over pedigree, right? So we want to create a world where you could get an opportunity, you can either get hired or you can get upskilled in whatever you want in the technology space, and it's not limited by the pin code that you're born in, or it's not limited by the school that you got the opportunity to go to, or it's not limited by your past experience of the companies that you worked in, right? So some of the headlines that came in was person X was from a village in Bangladesh where they were able to come out and create or like make this innovation, and
so cool.
they upskill themselves using HackerRank. Things like that came in. So that's really truly making a difference in the world. We have 27 million developers on our community, right? So we have a lot of, who better than us to really go about and make a difference in the world was what we were hearing mostly from our employees.
Yeah.
So our mission statement came from there, and it was really, we used to really use this phrase skills over pedigree quite often in the company. So it only felt natural to say, okay, this is actually our mission statement. That's what we stand for.
Yeah.
Then when we came to values, that one was an interesting one, right? Because if you think about culture, it is it has to be something which is very uniquely your own, right? So we spoke about looking at modeling culture on different companies. So let's say Google, as an example, is a company that everybody wants to model their culture on. Amazon's probably another, right? But if you look at these two companies itself, the way that their culture works, even if you think of something as specific as benefits and perks, their approach to it, their philosophy is very different. One is rooted in abundance, the other one is rooted in frugality, right? So it's very different. Neither is right or wrong, but it works beautifully for them because it's authentic to who they are as a company, right?
Yeah.
So that's the stance that we took. So the questions that we asked people were things like, what do you value in your colleagues, right? Like what behaviors and traits make somebody a great HackerRanker? What we also did as a leadership group is that we looked at all of the high performers in the company and said, okay, here are behaviors and traits that consistently show up for people that we consider high performing in HackerRank, right? So, so when it comes to values, so things like integrity, humility, things like that are great values to have, are values that a lot of companies have, but we felt like those are values that at a baseline, every employee should bring in to the company.
These
right?
are non-negotiable parts of character.
Correct. So we wanted our values to be very true to behaviors, and we wanted to be to dictate those behaviors as well, and that's where our new values came in.
No, I think that's actually very actionable for a lot of companies and teams, and I think whether it's your inception set of values or kind of refreshing them at some point. I think there's a great lesson in what you said, which is basically that your culture and values are already there.
Yeah.
And this exercise is about pulling that out and codifying it, right? I do think a lot of companies end up, there's kind of the aspirational values on the wall, but sort of the reality down here is not exactly those things, right?
Which is the biggest enemy of authenticity, right? Like people are able to sense that. Like if you're in a company that publicizes on LinkedIn that here's our culture, but you don't live it, people are able to see it very clearly. And if you see the values that we have today, they are unlike values that you see on most careers pages right now, right? So one of our values, you and I were chatting about this earlier. One of the values, I love all five, by the way, but one of my most favorite values is a value that we call truly, madly, deeply care. We are an intense company. We are a company that works really hard, and we're a company that cares very deeply about every single thing that we do. In fact, the way that the value is explained as well is that we care equally about the margins on your document as we care about the content, right? So we're a company that prepares a lot for everything that we do. So whether it's an all hands that I'm running with my team or with the company, we put the same amount of effort and dry runs into it than I would do for a board meeting as well, right? So now some people can look at it and say, that sounds too intense for me, like that's not the workplace for me. Or some can look at it and say, that resonates so well with me, that's the kind of place that I want to work in. So I want the values almost to be self-selecting, right? Like you look at them and say, sounds like the kind of place I fit in, or doesn't sound like my cup of tea, and which is fair.
Yeah, and I think that signaling in the talent attraction kind of recruitment process is so important. I think, the the folks who are looking for jobs, job seekers are also trying to figure out what's this place really like, and I think those things that's great, right? That's how you build a strong culture where, you know, there's some folks who don't even want to walk up this hill, right?
Right.
Which is great.
Yeah.
Like, so no,
and you have early attrition because of things like that, right? Like if what you're selling during the interview versus what you actually live, if it's not the same thing, then you're not really, then there's a disconnect. In fact, through our interview process, through our hiring process, we do a value fitment round as well, which is equally, if not more important than any of the tech rounds that we do, right? So it's a behavioral interview, which many people in the company are trained to do. And you ask people behavioral questions, situational questions on our exact values, and we want to bring in people whose value systems align with those of the company or not. And a lot of times those have been like the decision-making interviews for us as well.
Yeah, and I think that's like so critical to fiercely guarding your culture. So I think that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, and I mean, all of us are spending so much of our time working today, right? Like there's so much overlap with your work and life. Like you better enjoy the workplace that you're in, right? Like people you're with. Yeah.
How do they create the right conditions for their team to feel like they can show up authentically? I think, you know, different people are at different levels of comfort, self-awareness. How do we create kind of an environment to help people have bring their own kind of best selves to work and their authentic, unique selves to work? Yeah.
I think it starts with you. You know, it's not one big culture moment that happens that makes a workplace authentic or suddenly makes a team psychologically safe for you to work in. It's a series of intentional human things that you do that make it safe for people to show up as who they are. And if I have to really break it down, then I'd probably break it down to 3 steps, right? Like step 1, and that would be to actually sit with yourself and introspect and say, what is my leadership style? Like, I think a lot of us don't even ask that question, right? Like, what's the leadership energy that I give out? Like, if I Slack one of my team members and say, can you get on a call? Like, do they get nervous or, you know, do they get excited to get on a call with me, or is it neutral? And neither is right or wrong, but is it true to how you think your leadership style is, right? So step 1 for me would be even just that little introspection.
And can we double click on step 1? How do people do that? How can people really do that? Like on Monday, how do I just start introspecting?
For me, a lot of it has just been with feedback. I've asked the question, and it's not the answers that you get in performance reviews. You know, it's the answers that you can get with people that you trust, and actually say, hey, here, tell me things that I can do better. A lot of times, I think a missed opportunity is you provide people feedback, but you don't ask for feedback back as a leader, right? Like it's such a goldmine of resources or information that you can get, but you're just missing that opportunity. Either you don't want to hear it or you don't trust it. But I've been given some difficult feedback from people who have reported into me, and that I think has been fundamental in shaping who I am, or just bringing self-awareness to me too. So I would say that's step 1. Step 2 would be to even articulate it and tell your team this is the kind of leader that you are. One of the things that we do at HackerRank, I really like it, is we encourage our leaders to write a working with me doc. You know, it's kind of like a blueprint of who you are as a leader. And there's no set format. Everybody kind of writes it in their own way. But the common things that people write in that are our communication style. They write how do they like to receive feedback and give feedback. What are things that trigger them? What are things that motivate them? Right. So you kind of write that, and there's something about putting like thoughts to paper that makes you really sit with it and even introspect. And when you go back and share it with people, it's like a quick shortcut for people to get to know you better as a leader. Right. So I love that exercise that we do. And then of course, step 3 would be to truly live what you've written, right? If your actions and your words don't align, people are going to see through that. People actually don't want perfect leaders, right? People want leaders that they can trust, right? So
any other tools that I think people can use to show up in the right way?
What are things that you've done? I'm curious.
I do think modeling it yourself is super important. I think the way you show up in that space, you're really unlocking other people around you. I think that's one. I think 2 is really taking time to get to know people. So I think it's at every level, whether it's in one-on-ones or someone's just joining, or you just get to catch up with somebody over coffee in the company. I think if you actually truly care and show interest and want to know who they are, then I think that pulls it out of people.
Right.
And so I think that's very important.
That's so true. I just got reminded of it. One of the fun things one of my founders did as soon as I joined HackerRank 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago, he set up, so we used to have a weekly cadence, and then once a month he set up an agenda-less one-on-one with me, right? So no topic, it was just getting to know each other better. And we
Nice.
would ask questions about, tell me about your childhood, right? Like,
Yeah.
what did you want to do when you were growing up? And it gives you insight into an individual far deeper than any other conversation can, right? So we were very intentional about no
great.
work conversation
Yeah.
in this hour. I genuinely want to know you. And what it does to me is it says, here's a person X is very important, they're very busy, but they're taking out an hour every month to spend time with me because they want to invest that time in me, right? So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Just getting to know people at a human level.
Yeah. And so I think when leaders show people that their whole selves care because they're asking and they're making time for that, I think it reinforces that with other people, and then it has a good trickle down effect. I'm sure other leaders, your founder kind of modeled that, and I'm sure lots of folks do versions of that now.
Me too, right? Like I took a learning from that as well, saying, hey, I need to spend that time with my team and get to know them a little bit deeper at a more human level. And you know, and I feel like our journeys, our careers are long, and relationships matter. You know, your companies can sometimes be transient in our career, but those relationships are ones that are going to carry on, right? So yeah.
I think another thing too is vulnerability. Like I think for people to be authentic, they need to, you know, they're putting some part of themselves out there. And
Right.
that's almost a dangerous act in some way, right? Like people are scared to do that. And I think the more that your organization creates spaces for vulnerability and psychological safety, we all talk about psychological safety a lot, but I think vulnerability is kind of a softer, mushier word that we should talk about a bit more.
Could not agree with you more. And you know, I think early on in my career, I would shy away from showing emotion at work because I would always think, again, going back to the intersectionality of that minority group, right? When you belong to that group and you're in a room where everyone's a different gender, everyone's older, everyone's a different nationality than you are, then you are very afraid to show vulnerability or emotion because you feel like being stoic or being neutral or being aggressive even in emotions, right, is the way to lead well. And if I show emotion and if I'm vulnerable, like are they going to think, oh, she's not strong enough to be a leader? But so long as your decision making is not biased by emotions, right? Like so long as that is clear, I have found that it's absolutely fine to be emotional, vulnerable at work, and I actually embrace it today. And I find that people find it very relatable as well, right? Like I'll give you an example. Reorgs or restructuring, probably one of the hardest things that we do as leaders, right? Especially as HR. Everyone hates doing it. No one likes doing it, right? So when you've come to a place where you know that the decision to make the reorg or that restructure is based on the fairest thing to do, like it is the thing that's the right thing to do for the company. Once that is established, the number one job for my team becomes that the execution of that very difficult human experience is done in a way that's compassionate. It's done in a way that's kind as well. Like even the most difficult conversation can be done in a kind way. But the day of the announcement, the company is a wounded company, right? Like you have a lot of conversations which are difficult conversations to have. These are people you've hired, you've nurtured. These are friends. These are people that you've built companies with, right? So that's a difficult time for people to go through. And then as a company, when you come back and do the announcement, the whole company is wounded as well. And oftentimes, like earlier in my career, I would think if I show up as just strong and, you know, and say, okay, I've got this, like this is, you know, I'm solid and you can trust me, like that's the way to be. But now, like I let that human side show because it's freaking hard, you know, and it should be hard because you cared. So those feelings, I feel like that they're not fault, they're almost a feature, right? And people trust it more.
It's like, the thing we're doing sucks. Let's just all be honest about that.
The truth will set you free. And I'm really embracing that because people, again, can see through bullshit, pardon my French, but like people can see through that. You know, the more honest I can be, as long as I know it's done in a fair way, people do trust that as well. How does it show up for you, vulnerability?
Yeah, I mean, I think one, showing up as a leader, just sharing that, you know, I have my own fears and concerns about our company, and there are things I'm nervous about, and you know, it's not all hunky dory all the time, right? I think being okay with that, and just I think that actually it binds people to the mission even more because they're like,
I completely
oh my
agree.
gosh, I agree. Like I'm not comfortable with this thing either. We should all fix it together, right? I also kind of think about what is like all of our the way we look at authority,
Yeah.
right, is completely changed, or even institutions has changed in the last couple decades, right? So we used to look for like that strong central authority, and we would give some credence or respect to it, right?
Right.
But I don't think that's just true. I think everyone today is the individual is the institution,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Like we have our own power. If I want to get a message out, you want to get a message out to the entire world. You can do it from your LinkedIn. You can, like you have a huge mouthpiece. You can learn anything, right? So I sometimes think about that, right? Where it's like I'm not yes, I'm representing Loop, and it is an institution, but it's like all of our people here have a ton of power, and they're institutions on their own. And so I don't think I need to show up like some sort of large bank, right? That just has to exude power and has to show all this stability, because it's sort of I think the company is more like an organism, right? Like we're all kind of cells, and we're all, the higher that we vibrate, the higher that we live, the more energy that we each put out, kind of the stronger the ecosystem is. And
I love that.
It helps me to remember that, to be vulnerable, right? It's like people, like if I come up with some top-down central message anyway that doesn't feel authentic, it's almost has a negative impact on the company, because then every future statement has less and less integrity and truth to it, right? So I think it's so important to like, don't speak at all if you're going to be, unless you're going to be authentic. Because if you're speaking inauthentically as a leader, it just has a negative cost.
I fully agree with you. And I actually, what you said about everybody today has the agency as well, which it's so true. And I wish more people would go back and say that to their employees, right? Like it's not just agency to portray the company externally, but let's say even internally, right? Like I think early on, a lot of it, like what is the culture of a company, was thought to be dependent on HR, or was thought to be dependent on the founders of the company, right? That's actually not true. Like every single person makes a difference on what the company of the culture of the company is, right? So if you can empower that at every level, you've got to like move the focus just from saying, hey, the leadership group has to live authentically, right? Like it's got to transition over to everyone.
Totally. And I think that's where this conversation like is very adjacent to the culture conversation,
right?
Because a culture enables authenticity and stuff. So no, this is great. I think we haven't talked about this topic on this podcast. I'm so glad we were able to do that today. Do you have any final thoughts on authenticity for the listeners?
I mean, the only thing I would say is, again, it starts with you, and the most of your audience, as you mentioned on this call, is HR and HR leadership. Make it be an active conversation. Like, don't let this be something that is just said in a training and not touched upon after that, and model it as well is the only thing that I would say. The reason why I wanted to talk about this topic and not other topics which maybe get more, clicks on it. AI and HR, which would probably get you the most amount of clicks. The reason why I wanted to talk about this topic is I think we need to talk about the things that are uncomfortable, or we need to talk about the things that are abstract, right? The more that we talk about it, like I learned a lot from you in this conversation as well. And the more that we keep that as an active conversation, the more we can promote it.
Yeah, totally. I think a good actionable for everybody is to bring this up in their next staff meeting. And just ask each other, hey, we all agree this is important. How can we each show up? And I think it's a great way to start the conversation. Thanks so much, Preeti. I think this was so fun.
Yeah, likewise. I had a great time.
Yeah. We hope to have you on sometime soon to talk about maybe AI or anything else that you would love to chat about.
I'd love to. Thank you for this.
Yeah. Cool.
Awesome.